Welcome to Southern Sports Gumbo Thursday night recording, where we're going to talk a little bit of high school football in Georgia. We're going to make our final picks of the week, and then we're going to break down the Vandy Texas game. Go position by position, compare the teams, give our final thoughts on that game. So, Sweets, lead us into some Georgia football.
Fantastic. So for the Region 5 6A, first place in Region 5 6A is a matchup between North Paulding and the Marietta Blue Devils. North Paulding is 4-1 in region, 7-2 on the season. Marietta's 5-0 in region and 5-4 on the season. Marietta stepped up and upset a few teams. They were underdogs against Walton, underdogs against North Cobb. They just keep finding ways to win games. New coach Cam Dukas came in and revitalized the program and got these kids believing in themselves. It's something neat to watch. Quarterback Jaden Whiteside is averaging over 200 yards a game passing the ball. Titus Grant has over a dozen touchdowns on the year. Marietta's just getting it done. On the other side, North Paulding has running back Khalil Harrell, who averages just under 100 yards a game, along with Bryson Morris, who averages 101.6 a game. So they've got a great rushing attack, and they've done well. Their lone loss in region was to North Cobb. So here's what happens. If North Paulding beats Marietta, then there's a three-way tie for the region title between North Cobb, Marietta, and North Paulding. Then it comes down to head-to-head, which one has beat the other, which has beat the other, which has beat the other. So it goes to a point system. Don't ask me how that worked because I don't have the damnedest idea. But I do know that it's not going to matter because Marietta is going to win that game tomorrow night, 31-24, and bring home a region title for the Blue Devil fans. My second Georgia game of the week is the Wintersville Classic, Lowndes versus Valdosta. Lowndes and Valdosta are both in great shape. Lowndes is 9-0, Valdosta is 8-1. And the winner will win the region outright, I believe. And with Colquitt standing there with one loss in the region. Lowndes has quarterback Jace Johnson, who's a junior. He's a Texas A&M commit. He's passed for 870 yards on the year at 8 touchdowns to go along with 440 rushing yards. Wide receivers Kavion Thomas and Artavian Brown are two speeds that will also test the Valdosta secondary. For Valdosta, Deron Foster and Marcus Fennell are their tandem at running back, and they've got just under 2,000 yards between the two of them on the year. And they look for star DB Jalen Copeland to shut down that vaunted Lowndes passing attack. This is as big a game as there is in Georgia high school football every year. Lowndes and Valdosta, with Valdosta being the winningest program in America in high school football. Lowndes is the new school, the up-and-comer. They've been around for about 55, 60 years. But that rivalry is nasty. There's true hatred there. Tomorrow night's game is going to be a clash in styles with Dr. What's his last name? It'll come to me as the Valdosta coach, and Adam Carter is the Lowndes coach. I'm going to go ahead and take Lowndes tomorrow night. I think that Jace Johnson is just a little too much for the Valdosta defense. I think that Lowndes is
I'm
going to
going to
go
take two
undefeated
games.
in
One that's
region
close
and
to me
preseason. I don't think they're
on the
going to win
southern
state,
side
but I
of
do think
Atlanta,
they'll
and
go
then
into
the
the
other
playoffs
one
undefeated.
on the north
So
side
give
of
me the
Atlanta. But
Lowndes
two really good games, one 6A and one
41,
5A.
Valdosta
So
34.
6A, you have
Kev,
Carrollton,
what do you got on your games?
who's ranked third in the state, and you have Douglas County, who is ranked sixth in 6A in the state. Carrollton has been to the state championship 2 of the last 3 years, and they could be again this year. The last few years, their offense has been really strong, and they have a really good offense again this year, averaging 47 points a game. Their quarterback position this year, though, is they've played 2. C.J. Cyphers, who's a freshman and thrown for about 1,800 yards, and Mason Holtzclaw, who's a junior, and he's thrown for about 900. So they've kind of split some time depending. Cyphers is a starter, and if he's playing well, he stays in. But if they hit a dry spot, Holtzclaw came in and played well like he did against Gainesville a few weeks ago. The difference to me in this Carrollton team is their defense. In the years past, their offense has had to carry them. This year, their defense has only given up 13 points a game. Ryan Mosley, commitment for Georgia's playing both ways, wide receiver, and he plays defensive back. And then Peyton Zachary is a wide receiver that has over 800 total yards. Running back for Carrollton, Cameron Woods, 743 yards and 20 touchdowns. So Carrollton's a very well-rounded team. And then you have Douglas County, who's lost 2 games against really good competition. One was Langston Hughes, who's undefeated. When you look at top end talent, Douglas County has really good top end talent. Their two wide receivers, Aaron Gregory is committed to Texas A&M, Devin Carter committed to Florida State, and their quarterback Mike Johnson is committed to Utah. So their skill position players are as good as anybody. And again, they played Langston Hughes within a score, and Langston Hughes is undefeated in 5A and pretty much dominated everybody they played. Douglas County's a very good football team. The game's in Carrollton, and I will pick Carrollton to win the game. But if you want to go watch a football game this weekend in the state of Georgia and just see a lot of top end talent on the football field, Carrollton and Douglas County is the game to watch. I think Carrollton will win the game probably similar to what they've given up. I give it 42, but I think Douglas County will score more than the 13 that they're giving up. I go 42-24. Second game I want to talk about is in 5A, Milton and Roswell, and it's a game where it's two traditional rivals in that area of the state. And Milton was undefeated last year, state championship team, probably the best team in the state, whether it be 5A or 6A last year. Honestly, with all the talent they had, they're fifth ranked, where Roswell is third ranked this year. Roswell is coming off a big win over Gainesville last week in a game that game surprised me, but it speaks to how good a team that Roswell has this year. Trey Smith, their quarterback, has 1,900 yards passing, and Mick Peel has right at 900 yards rushing, and good offensive team. Whereas Milton is led by their defense. When you look at their defense linebacker, Blake Battaglia is a junior, good player, and then Tristan Lester is a safety that's going to Marshall, good player there. So I think Roswell will win the game. Again, Milton's only got two losses, and two losses against very good teams. They lost to Gainesville and they lost to Buford in week one. You know, Milton wouldn't surprise me if they won the game, but I think you got to go with Roswell as well as they're playing. Give me Roswell in this one, 31-20, and the game is at Roswell. So that's my two high school games of the week. DMAC, we're going to go picks against the spread next.
Yeah, that takes us picks against the spread. So I'll get things started with my favorites and my underdogs. I've got two each this week. My first favorite's going to be The Ohio State University. They're playing Penn State, who is just in a disaster right now. Ohio State's a 19.5 point favorite. I like them to win this game by 30. Their defense is elite. William Sayans really playing really good football at the moment. That's favorite number one for me. Favorite number two, I picked these guys a few weeks ago as a favorite on the road, and they lost. They're a favorite on the road again by the same spread. That's the Texas Tech Red Raiders, giving 7.5 to Kansas State. I don't think Texas Tech is going to have another slip up, so I'm rolling with the Red Raiders. I think they win this game, by double digits for sure. Then I move over to my dogs. My first underdog is the Mississippi State Bulldogs traveling to Arkansas. They are a 4.5 point dog in this game. I think they win this game straight up, but at the very least, I think they'll keep it within a field goal. Mississippi State has got to win an SEC game this season. And then wrapping up with Kentucky as my other dog, playing at the Plains in Auburn, 11.5 point dogs. I think this is probably going to be a one-score game either way. So in one-score games, Hugh Freeze is not very good. So I'm rolling with Kentucky here. Kevin, who do you have?
So favorite wise, I really like, and to me, this is a very strange line. I really like Tennessee -2.5 at home against Oklahoma. Tennessee's a very good offensive team and has a solid defense. I'm just surprised. It started 3.5, and I thought 3.5 was low. 2.5 really surprises me. I look at the positions, and I think Tennessee's better at quarterback, better at wide receiver, better at running back, better at offensive line. Front four on defense, I would go to Oklahoma, and linebacker probably even because Tennessee has some really good linebackers. And secondary, I would probably go even. Maybe, well, no, I'd go even because Oklahoma's secondary is not that good. So, to me, the only position group I would just outright give to Oklahoma in this is a defensive line, but yet Tennessee's a 2.5 point favorite. Surprises me there, but I would take Tennessee. as a favorite. My second favorite that I really like is Ole Miss minus 12.5 against South Carolina. I think that game last week against Alabama might have broke South Carolina. Ole Miss is getting better every week. Won by 8 on the road last week at Oklahoma. Yes, they could have a little letdown, but I just don't see it. I think Kiffin has them rolling. I think he's coaching them as well as he's coached any team in his career. And I think when I look at this game, and I just don't think South Carolina can keep Ole Miss out of the 30s. And I think Ole Miss scores 30, 34 points. Again, I don't see South Carolina scoring anything over 20 the way that their offense has been ineffective going on the road. I mean, their offense played well last week, but that was a home game and they were really up for it. And so I like Ole Miss minus 12.5. Third game, I'll just throw at you from a favorite standpoint. I like Minnesota minus 3.5 at home against Michigan State to cover there. And then on the underdogs, not as many games as I like this week in the underdog piece, but I'll start with Navy plus 6.5 against North Texas. I think North Texas wins that game, but I think Navy will be able to run the ball and shorten the game a little bit and keep it to a one score game in the end. And so give me Navy plus 6.5. Second game I like is kind of opposite of your favorite, and it's probably a dangerous game to pick. But Kansas State is playing really good football right now, and they're playing at home. Again, I think Tech wins that game, but I really like Kansas State to hang tight in that game through the fourth quarter and make it very interesting. And they're getting 7.5. So that would be the two that I really like. Again, I'll just throw this one out there. I think Bill Belichick gets a win in the ACC this week. He goes on the road against Syracuse. He's getting 2.5. Give me North Carolina. They're starting to play a little better, at least on defense. Sweet, what's your thoughts?
I like it. So I just got one each. For my favorite, I got the Georgia Bulldogs. They're laying 7.5 against Florida in the world's largest cocktail party. Florida's just down. They're a program that's in transition from the coaching staff to player turmoil to everything else. And Georgia's lost a game. Georgia knows that they need to win big, and earn style points to make sure that they're covering all their bases to get into the college football playoffs. So I like Georgia by 2 touchdowns plus in this game against the Gators. For my underdog of the week, I'm going to take the Vanderbilt Commodores. They're 3-point dogs right now against Texas. I think they win the game straight up. Texas has done nothing all year long to show me that they've been consistent in any way, shape, or form. And that's all Vanderbilt's done is been consistent and find ways to win ball games, close games, whatever. Vanderbilt's done it. So when it comes down to choosing a quarterback to win this game, and I've got Arch on one side and
Yeah,
Pavia
so
on the other,
Kevin, at least we
Pavia is
know
the one
one
who's
of
winning all
us
the
will
games
get
this
at
year. I
least
like
1 point this week
That's
Pavia
as
and
right.
we
Vanderbilt
against
to beat
each other.
Texas
It's just
outright
2 weeks in a
on
row. We
Saturday.
went opposite in that Ole Miss
Where are we going
Oklahoma game
next, T
last
Mac?
week. But we did talk on the weekend, and you did favor Ole Miss on the weekend. So I'll say that one. So you didn't lose a point there.
So we've got now let's talk this Vandy Texas game. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good game. I think Texas's defense is really good, but I want us to go through position group by position group with these two teams. And let's start with the quarterback position. Tweets, I know you're a big Diego Pavia fan. Get things started on the quarterback battle. Who has the edge here?
I like Pavia. I just like he's a winner. He's got moxie, and he's led an underdog Vanderbilt team for 2 years now. Not just this year. They were winning games last year that they weren't supposed to win. Arch, he was never going to live up to the hype because there was just too much on him. I mean, the poor kid was being anointed as a two-time Heisman winner before he even took his first college snap as a starter. So and Texas just they've been down this year. Their line has been awful, where
So
Vanderbilt's really controlled the line of
I
scrimmage
agree
on
with you,
both sides of the
Pavia.
ball
Let me
in the
break it
games that
down a
they've
little bit
played.
like
So
this. So
so
again,
give
you're
me
right.
Pavia
Arch has been very
over Arch here.
inconsistent.
What are your thoughts on the quarterback position, Kev?
When I look at how Arch has played this season, he played a full, pretty good game against Oklahoma. But he normally starts very slow. He has had good fourth quarters against teams. He had a pretty good fourth quarter against Ohio State. He had a good fourth quarter against Florida. He had a good fourth quarter last week to bring him back in that game against Mississippi State. But now, one thing too we got to consider with Arch is he's in concussion protocol here with this. So, and last night he was listed as questionable. So, does he play? That's another thing to think about in this thing. But where I'm going with that, my analysis there is, I think he's inconsistent throughout the game. I don't see that any different. I think he's going to play up and down in this game. He might have a good fourth quarter like he has in the past, but he's going to have some dry spots, and that's Pavia won't. Pavia will be consistent, and again, his offensive line is good, and the Pavia does a good job of throwing the ball to Sherrill and his two tight ends. And when I look at their overall passing game, the way that they use it, and Tim Beck is the OC, I like Pavia better. D-Mac.
Yeah, so I'm the same way. I love the way that Pavia's played the last 2 years.
What do you
The
think, D-Mac?
team is bought in on what Clark Lee's doing, and they're bought into Diego Pavia. I don't feel like that's the case in Austin, Texas right now, so I lean Pavia here too. So next room is gonna be the running backs room, and this one's interesting to me because if you look at just, talent level, I would lean Texas, but when you account how these guys are playing this year, Cedric Alexander looks great. He's got 6 touchdowns, averaging 5.5 yards a carry. And then you look at MK Young, the backup, 5 touchdowns. He's averaging actually over 12 yards a carry in his limited role for about 400 yards. Then you've got AJ Newberry over there. I give this room to Vandy because they've executed at such a high level in the run game. What do you think, Sweets?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it starts because of their offensive line. I just like Vanderbilt's offensive line better. I think that you nailed it on the head. Talent wise, Texas is probably a more talented room, but Vanderbilt's offensive line is the
Yeah.
difference between
So
the two running
I
games. So
agree.
I
Let me add
agree with
this
you
though. I think
and
you
take the
now again
Vanderbilt
both
running back room
quarterbacks are
over the
good running
Texas running back room.
quarterbacks.
What do you think,
But
Kev?
when you add running game totality, I think Pavia is a little better runner than Arch, especially with his effectiveness. Again, third down conversions and how he gets his yards rushing are there in key moments of the game. So when I add Pavia in there, and again the totality of Vanderbilt's rushing game, I think it's better than Texas. With the top end talent of Baxter and Wisner, I think Vandy has more ways to beat you with their running game, and their offensive line is definitely better. So what next? Which group next?
Yeah, so we essentially just grouped O-line in there too. So let's go tight ends, and I'll let you get us started on this one, Kevin.
Yeah, so to me, Vanderbilt's tight ends are a lot better than Texas, and they're so much part of the passing game that Pavia runs. He likes to go over the middle between the hashes more than anything, and both those tight ends, he'll use them, and they're both really good pass catchers too. They can stretch and go get it. They're both tall, and so I definitely like Vandy's tight ends, and that's Indy's the transfer from Cal for Texas is a good tight end, but Vandy has two of them, and the way they utilize them is good. And we did say offensive line, but I want to go back to that just for a second. Vanderbilt's offensive line is one of the best in the SEC. Texas is in the bottom third. The offensive line is a substantial difference better for Vandy. I'm telling you, Vandy's offensive line is going to be a finalist for the Joe Moore Award. So that's a big advantage in my opinion. Sweet's your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'll take Stowers over everybody in both rooms. He's aggressive. He used to be a quarterback, and he's been a playmaker for Vanderbilt. Him and Pavia have been able to put it together, and he can also block a little bit. He's not he's nobody's going to mistake him for a Washington Redskins H back in the day, but he'll put his helmet on you, at least try to get out in front of you and create
Yeah,
some
I'm
running
with
lanes for
both of you
Pavia
guys.
or whoever's
Eli
running the ball
Stowers
for
is
Vanderbilt.
definitely
So I like
the
Vanderbilt
best
there too.
on the
Where are you at
field
on this
in
one,
this
D-Mac?
game at tight end. And as good as, I like Jack Injuries a lot, but I would even put Cole Spence as the number 2 wide receiver or number 2 tight end on the field this week. He had a huge game against LSU a couple weeks ago. So Vandy is just ways ahead in every offensive category so far. So that brings us to the wide receiver room. Sweets, get us started on this one.
So I would
I
go.
just pulled up my
This is the
defense.
only
Go
place
ahead,
I see
Kev.
Texas
Pull yours
as a
up. I
little better
skipped
than
over the wide
Vanderbilt with
receiver
Parker
and pulled up my
Livingstone
defense.
and
I'm
Ryan
sorry.
Wingo and Niblett and those guys at wide receiver. I would go Texas in this group, even though Cheryl is done a really good job for Vandy this year. and Pavia goes to him a lot. I think the depth of Texas and the ceiling that those guys has is just a little better than Vandy. But again, when it comes down to execution, Vandy's receivers, they don't drop the ball, they run good routes. So again, this is a quality group when you're talking about Vandy's group. We're just talking about Wingo's a potential first, second round pick. I think Niblett can play in the NFL, and Livingstone's a very good possession receiver. All three of those guys could play in the NFL. D-Mac, what's your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, I'm with you. The Texas wide receiver room is really talented. DeAndre Moore's another key piece for them. I love Cheryl. I think he's doing a lot of good things, but they're not really called upon a ton at Vanderbilt as to where Texas is definitely going to lean on their wide receivers a little more. So I'll give the nod to Texas here as well. What about you, Sweets?
I agree. Talent wise, Texas is talent wise one of the top wide receiver rooms in the country. Actually, if you look at some of the guys that they've signed over the past 3 4 years, there's a lot of talent in that room. They haven't been utilized as well as they should have in their time there because Arch just hasn't been as consistent as they hoped he'd be this year. But I definitely give them the edge. I love what Cheryl's doing at Vanderbilt. And I love the way
Say one thing. Let me say
Lee's
one
got the
more thing
passing
about
game
this
rolling
wide
there.
receiver
Vanderbilt can do a little bit of
scenario.
everything. Talent wise, though,
Vanderbilt's
Texas is a lot
their
better there.
their weakest part of their team is their secondary. So for Texas to win this game, to me, this position group has to dominate. They've got to get a couple big plays against Vandy, similar to what Alabama did. If Texas wide receivers and Manning combined, if they don't hit some big plays in the passing game, I don't see how they can beat them. The wide receivers for Texas have to dominate Vandy to win this game. That's just my opinion. All right, defense. Where are we going next?
Yeah, let's go defensive end first. Kevin, get us started on this one.
Well, we're going to break it down in first. I Vandy. When I just look at them, they execute so well. But when you look at Texas, they do have Colin Simmons on that defensive end, and so I would have to give the advantage to Texas at that, and maybe a big advantage to Texas when you're talking about defensive end because they bring guys off the bench too. They have a lot of depth there. Texas would be my favorite there. And Sims is starting to play well. The first part of the year, I think a lot of it was he was splitting snaps, but in the last 3 or 4 games, he's had about 5 sacks. So I would go Simmons here. This is one. Vandy's offensive line is good. This is one that they cannot let Colin Simmons take over on defense and put a lot of pressure on Pavia and make Pavia do things in the run game that he doesn't want to do. Sweet, what's your thoughts?
I agree. I give a slight advantage to Texas because of Colin Simmons and his talent here, and I think that's going to be one of the bigger matchups that decides the game is how Simmons is going to be able to do with two things: one, getting pressure on Pavia, keeping him in the pocket; two, not letting him. Simmons is going to have to contain and set the edge and not let Pavia get those lanes. So if Simmons pins his ear back and starts heading, straight up the field, I think that's going to work to Vanderbilt's advantage and give them a decided advantage in that part
Yeah,
of the game.
I'm
So
going
I do like
Texas
Texas'
here on
talent
the
there better
defensive
than
ends.
Vanderbilt's. Who you
Ethan
got,
Burke,
D-Mac?
Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, and Brad Spence, and then Zena. Those five guys in the rotation have combined for 13 sacks this season. They're really good. They're gonna have a very tough test against this Vanderbilt offensive line, but if I'm building a team, I would rather their defensive ends over Vandy's. And I think the problem with Colin Simmons was he was just playing for a not so good fantasy football team early on in the season. So that brings us to the inside.
Boy, you got that right. That
So that
fantasy
that
football team
brings
that
us to
chose
the
him, boy, those
interior.
those two are idiots.
On the defensive line, and I know Vanderbilt's starting nose tackle, Yelanin Quachera. I think I butchered that a bit, but he's going to be out this week. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do here. I mean, they've got some options, but I'm going to lean Texas here again. Hero Canoe's playing good, Cole Brevard's playing good, Travis Shaw, Rod Watson, Alex January. I think they've got a really good 5 deep in the defensive line category at nose tackle and defensive tackle, so I give them the edge here as well. Who do you have, Sweets?
I agree with you. Texas has recorded 28 sacks on the year, most of them coming from across the front line there. Watson has stepped up along with Canoe. They're just, they're doing work in there. They're consistent, and they're going to need to be against Pavia this week. That D line and the Vandy offensive line, I think, is the biggest matchup in the game, and whether they are able to contain Pavia
Yeah,
and keep him
so,
from beating
again, I
him
think this is a
with his
depth
feet more than
scenario.
anything. What are your
Vanderbilt's got
thoughts,
some
Kev?
good guys here at D tackle. Zaylen Wood, Jalen Stone, Aaron Bryant can still fill in even though they might miss their starter at nose tackle. They've got some good players, and they'll be able to do some rotational things, and they'll be solid. They've been solid there all year. So I don't like when I compare offensive lines, I don't see this as like a huge difference at defensive tackle, but to your point, D-Mac, and Sweet you too, the depth. I mean, Texas has got 5 that they can rotate in and out, and, just that overall depth, it gives them a lot of advantages in that. So, but I would go Texas just for depth. But again, just like what you referenced earlier, Sweets, with Simmons, Texas better stay in their lanes because Pavia is one of the best at coming to the line of scrimmage, and if he sees you out of your lane, he doesn't hesitate. He's off, and he will get his yards.
So that brings us to the linebacker room. Sweets, get us started on these positions.
I think we lean Texas here. I like Anthony Hill Jr. He leads the team with 59 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, with 3 forced fumbles on the year. Colin Simmons is, they consider him an edge, a linebacker. All I know is that he was trash the first half of the year. Again, whoever drafted him were a couple of idiots. But Vanderbilt's got some strength at linebacker as well with Anthony Orji, uh, um, and CJ Taylor.
Go ahead and jump in here while Sweets is coming back. So I'm gonna call this position a draw. I think Texas has more NFL talent, but he mentioned Orgy Taylor, and you have Longwell and Langston Patterson in there too. Nick Rinaldi can be effective for Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt has a lot of depth here, and those guys play very disciplined. Clark Lee does a good job of coaching those guys up. So I'm going to go a draw with this, even though we're going to hear more about Texas guys in the NFL when that time comes. D-Mac, what's your thoughts on the linebacker position?
Yeah, I'm giving Texas a slight edge. Both teams have a lot of depth here, but I think Anthony Hill and Ty Anthony Smith are going to be the 2 best linebackers on the field this week. So, I give them the slight edge, but it's not like an overwhelming plus in the Texas favor there. So that brings us to the cornerback room. You want to get us started there, Kevin?
Yeah, so Texas cornerbacks are, some of the best in the country when you look at Muhammad and Gilbo. They've been really good all year. They're solid. So to me, this is a decided advantage to Texas. Even if you go star position, Grayson Littleton, Texas has a lot of talent at cornerback position. They got a lot of talent across their defense. Cornerback, they've got guys that'll be 5-year starters in the NFL. I think this is a big advantage to Texas. What's your thoughts, D-Mac?
Yeah, I'm with you. Malik Muhammad's playing phenomenal football here down the stretch. He had 2 picks in a game a couple weeks ago. So they're really playing good football. Jalen Gilbo's looking really good. And then you throw the star with Littleton in there. They're really playing great football right now at that position. So, Sweets, you want to talk about the cornerbacks?
I'm just glad I can talk at all. I about choked to death. Yeah, I think Texas is probably one of the better secondaries in the country. I think that Malik Muhammad and Warren Robinson at cornerback have done a great job. Texas is able to, D up on the outside. So because of the pass rush you're able to get on teams. So that certainly helps the secondary and vice versa. I think that Texas has a decided advantage there, and that's another thing they're going to have to do is they're going to have to keep Pavia from beating with his arm too. I just think this is going to be a great game all the way around, and sincerely think that Clark Lee outcoaches Sark, and that's where the game is decided right there.
Yeah, so
Where are you
before
at
we
on this one,
dive
DMAC?
into final predictions, I want to cover safeties and special teams real quick. Starting with safety, I think CJ Hurd is maybe one of the best safeties in the SEC right now. Definitely a top 5 safety in the SEC, in my opinion, playing really good football. And then you look over at Texas, Michael Taffy. It looks like he could potentially be out another week here. So I'm actually going to give the edge in the safety room to Vanderbilt in this one. Who do you like in this one, Kevin?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you without Taft for Texas. He's a huge part of their defense. He's their leader on their defense. I would go Vandy with their safeties. Vandy's safeties are they're really good against the run and they're solid against the pass. So I would agree. Similar to kind of what we were talking with the linebackers that I called a draw, and you guys went slight advantage to Texas. I would say this is a slight advantage to Vandy. Texas still has talent there. Sweets, your thoughts here with the safety room.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I think it's a pretty even matchup. I think a lot of it is dependent upon how much pressure their lines can get on it for coverage. I think I like Texas a little better. I think they got better athletes back there. It's I'm excited for this game. I
So
think it's
this
going to be a
brings
really
us
good
to
game.
where games are won and lost. Special teams. Kevin, get us started on special teams.
Yeah, so both teams are solid in special teams. Neither team's been bad, but when I go, I like Vanderbilt's kicker just a little bit better. And again, I there's no weaknesses when you watch Vanderbilt play. So from that standpoint, I give them just a slight advantage in the coverage part of the special teams within that this week. And again, their kicker. So I'm going to go slight advantage to Vandy here. Sweet, your thoughts?
I like Vandy here as well, and I think that this is where they win the game is on special teams here. Be it with a long field goal or something like that at the end. Maybe a block punt, perhaps a few big returns. I think the Vanderbilt special teams is what ends up pulling this game out for them in the
Yeah,
end. What are your thoughts, D Mac?
I'm going the opposite way. I give them the advantage in the kick game a little bit, but one guy you can't rule out is Ryan Niblett here. Returned a 79-yarder last week against Mississippi State to force overtime, and they ended up winning the game. So I'm going to be the different one in this category, and I'm going to give Texas the edge in special teams solely because of Ryan Niblett here. So now let's dive into our final prediction for this game. When we look at kind of the split, Vandy's the heavy favorite in offense. Texas is the favorite on defense. So, you're going to have Texas's best go up against Vanderbilt's best. Sweets, what are your final thoughts on this game?
Like I said, I got Vanderbilt pulling it out 27-24, winning straight up and obviously covering. I think at the end of the day, Pavia is gonna make just enough plays with his legs. They're gonna get a 50+ yard field goal. And then Clark Lee's gonna dial it up on the defensive side of the ball. They're gonna shut Arch down and leave with a victory. Where are you at
Yeah,
on
so
this one,
again,
Kev?
I think this game comes down to, like I said, the dead spots that Arch has, and I don't think Pavia will have those dead spots. I think you'll see Vandy consistent through the game, and I think you'll see Texas go through periods where they go a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half, 2 quarters, where their offense doesn't do much around Arch. So, look, both teams are pretty good with turnover margin. Texas is +7. Vandy's +4. Vanderbilt does not, traditionally have a lot of penalties, even though that they're again, we talk about their offensive line being very good. When you watch this game, they're as good as it gets at at the modern day non-holding calls. They'll keep their hands inside so they avoid them. Buddy, they got you wrapped up. So, but they don't have a lot of penalties. So, but give me Vanderbilt 30, Texas 20, and 10-point victory for Vanderbilt, where Arch plays well in the fourth quarter, but they get down early. And unlike Mississippi State, Vanderbilt will keep that time of possession, and Texas will not be able to come back. DMAC, your thoughts?
Yeah, on Tuesday I took Texas in this one with even more uncertainty around Arch Manning. a new quarterback getting a start. I'm going to lean Vandy here with you guys. I think they win by probably a field goal in this one. I'm going to go 27-24. Vandy gets the win. And kind of to your point, Sweets, I think Clark Lee kind of wins the chess match in the coaching category here. So, any last thoughts before we wrap up, Sweets?
No, I like I said, this is the one game that I'm really looking forward to is the Texas Vanderbilt game. I want to watch that from bell to bell. I'm really curious to see if Vanderbilt can keep it going, if Pavia can dial up the magic one more time, if Lee can dial up that defense and get enough stops against Texas talented wide receivers to pull out a victory. What about you, Kev?
Yeah, it's a good week of football starting Friday night, North Texas and Navy. So don't disclude Friday night. That is a potential playoff game, playoff type game for both those teams battling to get that non-power four bid. So you got a good game there. Again, I love Texas and Vandy. I think that's going to be a great game to watch. Florida, Georgia is always a good game to watch, but again, I agree with you, Sweets, there in this one. It's probably a double-digit win for Georgia since Kirby's there. He's tend to do that. Got a lot of interesting games this week that are not necessarily playoff contention games. Arkansas, Mississippi State would be a fun game to watch, and both teams need a win. I think Mississippi State probably wins that game, but I think it's a field goal game either way. So you have some games like that this week. Excuse me, Kentucky and Auburn. That'll be an ugly game, defensive game in that, but it'll be a competitive game. And then another thing that I would say to watch for is I really want to see how Ole Miss comes back and plays this week. Just, will they be dominant? They should be if they're going to, go into the playoffs and make some noise. And then the last game I'll mention, Tennessee and Oklahoma. That's going to be a fun game to watch. Both teams fighting for a lot, so we'll see how that rolls for them. If Oklahoma loses this game, their season could get tough. D-Mac, any last thoughts you got?
No, I think you guys nailed these. So, guys, thanks for listening to our recorded podcast here. Remember, we will be doing our weekly wrap up and our conference outlook on Sunday. So, tune into that, and we'll see you guys soon.